Hard Turn is presented by Overlake Medical Center and Clinics.
Life is full of big moments of change and transformation where we have to pivot on our path.
Those moments come with a wide variety of emotions, from fear and anxiety to joy and relief.
I'm Kelly Koopmans.
And I'm Mary Mom.
And this is Hard Turn. Hello and welcome, everyone. I am Kelly Koopmans.
I'm Mary Mom.
And welcome to Hard Turn. Mary, I have a question for you.
I might have an answer.
What you sipping on, girl?
Hot water.
Wow. Attractive.
You know, it's so cold in here. It is, the AC is being pumped through. We're about to freeze, and this hot water is my saving grace this morning.
It's really doing the trick. I mean, if the answer were really anything other than water, I feel like our producer would not be very happy with us. So I've got water in my cup, too. I don't have any bubbly.
Well, I brought the bubbly.
Oh.
I like my seltzer water, sparkling water, and I remember it has bubbles. Probably not a good idea for recording day.
That kind of bubbles. So we're not popping bottles in here today. And that's specifically, that makes a lot of sense for what we're talking about, because we are talking about alcohol and the decision for some to cut back.
Okay.
So I'm very excited to talk about this. I feel like right now, there's really this big craze of people cutting back on how much alcohol they're consuming. We've heard of Sober October or Dry January, all these things. And people have a lot of different reasons why they might want to do it. Alcohol's expensive. So if you're paying a lot of money for it, some people want to save money. Some people just want to get healthier, maybe don't like how it feels. They want to do something for their health because, spoiler alert, it is not particularly good for you.
The whole red wine, good for the heart.
There's a lot to be said about that. I think that often people are looking for any headline that will reinforce any amount of drinking is okay. And oftentimes you hear from doctors, you go for a physical, they ask how much alcohol do you drink? And you always tell the truth, right, Mary?
Doesn't everyone else?
The answer is I don't think everyone else does. So if you're listening out there and you don't always tell your doctor the truth, just at least let's have this conversation and we can just all evaluate how we feel about our relationship with alcohol after the fact.
Well, I think you just hit on something right there, because I don't think you could detect the sarcasm coming through the microphone when I said, doesn't everyone else? Meaning it's just one of those things that no one wants to be 100% honest about, and insert your answer here, X, Y, and Z.
And it's so funny that there's even shame attached to something that is ubiquitous.
Yes.
You go to brunch, there's alcohol. You go to a movie theater, there is alcohol. You go to a work event, you go to a PTA event.
Sometimes there's alcohol.
Sometimes
sporting events.
Book club.
Yes. Anyways, it's everywhere now.
So today we're going to be talking to Katie Nessel. Katie Nessel made the decision to not get sober, but to become sober-ish. So she's cutting back on alcohol by about 90%. She said that she was drinking about 15 drinks a week. She cut it all the way back, and we're going to talk about all the different reasons of why she did that, how it made her feel. But the key with her is that she then turned it into a job. So she's an influencer now on the grams, and she is known as the Soberish Mom. She has 181,000 followers, and she just shares the impact alcohol had on her life. She shares different reviews on non-alcoholic or low-alcoholic drinks, talks about the health impacts it's had on her life and on her parenting, and she puts it all out there and went from working in the hospitality industry to now putting her whole story and her relationship with alcohol on the internet. Other fun fact, she went to Sammamish High School.
Oh, she's local.
Yes, she is local. I went to Newport High School. She went to Sammamish. We weren't friends directly, but did
same circle
sports and stuff together. And so when I saw her last year, she was talking about Soberish Mom, and I was like, oh, that's Katie Williams from Sammamish. Turns out her name is now Katie Nessel.
Oh, wow, Kelly. That's really cool.
So anyway, yes, she is here local. If you find her on Instagram, we can talk all about it. Before we get into her decision and why she enjoys this feeling of being soberish, I thought we could each start by sharing a little bit about our own relationship to alcohol. So would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
I can start. I do have a relationship with alcohol. I won't say we're best friends, but I will say she's a good friend.
How so? How does that manifest itself in your life?
Well, it's different. I was not the party type in college. There wasn't a whole, experimental drinking, all that stuff. But it wasn't, keggers every weekend. That was not my experience. Was never a beer person for a long time. I would say after getting married and having kids, that's when my relationship with alcohol really started. So, red wine, cocktails at dinner, not dinner at home, mind you, when you're going out to eat, that kind of thing. It was always kind of like it was the treat. It was something to look forward to. So it was never, a six-pack of beer, a Bud Light on a Tuesday. It was never that. It was more of the social ambiance, the specialness, the craft cocktails, that kind of thing, the fancy wines. It kind of started that way. But like I said, the interesting thing for me when I look at how it's affected my life, it was definitely as I was more mature, not when I was young, 21, and reckless.
And that is almost exactly what Katie's story is. And we'll talk about it. She described it as sort of this slow creep of, she got through college, she worked in hospitality, but then she became a mom. And a lot of what we're kind of dancing around here is the mommy wine culture.
That could be it.
And you sign on to Instagram and you've got all the funny videos about how mommy's drinking her mommy juice or something just to get through bedtime. And it makes a lot of people laugh. And I think beneath some of that laughter is some discomfort. My own relationship with alcohol, I shared a story earlier with you. In high school, I had a fake ID. So my friend and I were the ones who would buy it.
Only the cool kids had fake IDs, Kelly, so...
I don't know if it was like really cool or if it was just we had access to someone who gave us this fake ID. Quick side note, and it's not a good idea. I wouldn't recommend it, kids out there, if you're listening, but I had this fake ID. I had it in my wallet. I got pulled over for some reason. I don't know what it was, but I whipped out the fake ID and I put it under my leg. The cop came and talked to me, and it was no big deal. I gave him my real license and all these things. He went away. But when I stood up out of my car, because it was summertime and I was wearing shorts, the quality of this fake ID, Mary, is that of a temporary tattoo, because I peeled it off of my leg and there was my not real birthday.
Tattooed on your thigh.
Tattooed on my thigh.
So classy.
So classy. I do not wish this for any of your children or my own. But I would say a relationship with alcohol. We never really talked about alcohol in my family growing up, other than my dad was very adamant about abstinence, just period, the end of not drinking alcohol. And so I didn't really know where there was flexibility in terms of experimenting and not. So I just kind of tried with my friends. And then in college, alcohol was kind of around. But then when I got older, similar to you, is I found it to be this treat at the end of the day. And when I found I was looking forward to that, then I was kind of like, I think I need to think about this for a second. In life, other things happened. We had some challenges in our family over the course of the last year. So last April rolls around and I just thought, with all this other stress going on in life, I think any depressant added to my system is not helpful. So that's what
really good guardrails. Internal guardrails. Wow.
I think it was out of necessity to survive, I think, and knowing just it wasn't healthy. Anyway, that's my own personal story. Everyone has their own personal story. So let's get to Katie's, because that's kind of where you and I are at right now. Katie's decision to cut back pretty significantly. But I want to just jump right off the bat here of how she said it made her feel immediately after she stopped drinking.
It's changing that one small thing, which is really not that small when you first start out, but changing that one thing in my life made everything else in my life better. I mean, from my, small things like my skin, my energy, to my sleep, my anxiety improved so greatly. My patience with my kids, my parenting improved in such a dramatic way and pretty quickly.
So Katie talks about when she was being a stay-at-home mom and she had her kids, and she says that was the hardest job she has ever had. And it was something she wanted to do. And she had the ability to because her husband was working. And she found that she was drinking to try and make the parenting less stressful. And yet it always came tinged with anxiety when things weren't going as well as you wanted bedtime to go or as smoothly. And that her patience was just so much more narrow. And so she paints a pretty rosy picture for immediately after stopping alcohol of immediately feeling so much better. Have you ever gone through a time where you're like, I'm going to do a sober October or dry January or I mean, pregnancy?
Yes, pregnancy for sure. But that's not a good example, though, because
it's forced.
Well, that, and also your body is going through so many different changes.
Oh, you weren't comfortable growing a human?
I know. But to answer your question, no, and I can't remember when it was, but there were periods in my life where I ended up being sober for a few months, but it was never because of a thing. It was never because I made a conscientious decision like, okay, it's January, I'm going to do this. My personality is such that I can't do it that way. But if it naturally rolls into it, I am aware of what's going on, and it's like, oh, let's try this. I haven't had wine in 2 months. I think it was coming off the flu. There was some sort of illness or something happened where I wasn't eating, I wasn't drinking anything. Nothing sounded good. And in the course of that, as I recovered, it turned out, 2 weeks turned into 4 weeks turned into 9. It's like, oh, what do you know? I feel better. I'm not sick anymore. I haven't had alcohol all this time. And I would totally agree with Katie. I never slept better.
I didn't have the ability like you to just, I haven't even realized I haven't had anything. I made a very conscious decision in April that I was going to see how long I could just go without any. So I was very aware day to day because the weekends roll around and the weekends used to be associated with you have a beer while you're watching football or baseball or something like that. And so for me, it was a very, very much a clear pattern that was happening. Okay, another day, another day, another day. And then slowly as time goes on, then you realize, okay, I guess it's been about a month or it's been about 2 months or something like that.
What did you notice?
I immediately noticed better sleep and much more patience with my kids.
Wow.
Yeah. The bedtime process, because I wake up at 3, I go to bed after the kids go to bed. So in my mind, the clock is ticking. Kelly, you cannot go to bed until they are asleep.
High stress.
Which is high stress already. And I found any alcohol in my system during that process didn't make it go smoother. It had more of that built-in anxiety of like, why isn't this going faster? Let's go. Like,
is that when you would normally have a glass of wine?
Yeah. That. And for me, it wasn't so much wine. It was like a beer, like a IPA or a pale ale or something. A craft beer. Yeah. How Pacific Northwest is that? Anyway, so I want to talk a little bit more about Katie and where things happened for her. So she worked in the hospitality industry. In her 30s, she became a mom. She wasn't really going out, but it was exactly as we were talking about before when she was staying at home that she realized alcohol was becoming more of a nightly thing and then even more so on the weekends. Now she says, I'm stuck at home 14 hours a day with only children. And for her, that was very difficult. And the way that she was coping with some of that stress was looking forward to drinking at the end of the day. Her husband was also traveling, so she felt very isolated, which I think feeds into this whole mommy wine culture that exists. And she says she noticed that the hangovers were getting worse and she realized she had to make a change.
I'm starting to feel like this is a habit I don't like. And so I made the decision last January in 2023 I couldn't even make it through a full dry January. I was like, okay, I can do a couple weeks. Let's try like a cleanse. Let's see how I feel. And it was like a switch flipped for me. Within 10 days, I felt dramatically different. Like my energy was improving. My sleep was dramatically different. And even within 10 days, I could start to feel my patience with my kids improve. And I could start to feel more confidence in my decision-making and my parenting decisions. And I earned back so much more in my life than alcohol ever gave me. And so that's why I'm a big proponent of moderation or just starting out, trying to cut back to see how deprioritizing alcohol in your life might have a dramatic impact for you.
I love how she tried to start this as a cleanse. It wasn't just getting alcohol out of her system. She knew she needed a reset in general. She was having some gut issues at the time. Her sleep was not good. And she didn't know if this was diet specific or alcohol specific. So she decided, I'm going to go for this cleanse. I'm going to see where it goes. And it turns out it had some pretty impeccable timing for her too. So in this next clip, I want it very close to this decision here so you can hear about a spot that would have been very difficult had she still been drinking, like if she had alcohol in her system just a couple of days after, because there was this moment where, Katie's family lives nearby. Katie's starting this cleanse, so she's not drinking at this point. Her dad was out of town and her mom fell. and they had to take her to the hospital, and they needed someone to come to the hospital. And Katie had this realization, oh my gosh, I'm sober now, but what if I would have had 3 to 5 drinks in my system?
And I am so glad in this moment that I'm totally sober and that I can be there for someone who really needs me. And I've never woken up and been so glad I had a bottle of wine the night before. And so that was kind of like a very obvious, but in the moment, kind of this aha moment for me. And then the second one was I had a lump in my breast and I had to have surgery and go under anesthesia, have it removed. And that is when I learned about the correlation between alcohol and cancer, specifically breast cancer for women. It's one of the highest risk factors for women. And I never knew that. And so that was like, well, the veil has been lifted now that I know I can never go back. And so those kind of experiences within the first month of me trying to really change my habits with alcohol was enough to be like, this is going to be a long-term change for me.
So Mary, I don't know if you remember back to Michelle's episode, we were talking to her about breast cancer and when she realized she had it. And people are just kind of having these aha moments. For a lot of people, sometimes a health scare is what can make them reevaluate things in their life, whatever it is. If it's alcohol, if it's drinking, is it your sleep habits? And this really resonated for me because with Michael and his cancer, I don't know what causes what. I don't know. There is no reason why Michael would develop his cancer specifically. But I just started thinking about my overall health and trying to think of, is there something I can control? And in the moment, the one thing it felt like I can control is whether or not I drink. And that was one thing I think that kind of matched up with what Katie was saying. This was one thing that she could control. Who's to say what causes, various diseases or illnesses? But if you can't control one thing, and that was one thing she felt she could control, and it was one thing I felt I could control, to take action on that.
Well, I'm so struck by the timing of what happened. Her mother needed her own health scare, dealing with that, all of it happening after she decided to go on the cleanse at the time, and being so grateful that she was in a position of health and mental clarity where she could really, help out.
And it's not easy. It's very hard because she has all of these patterns built into life already, of having the alcohol at night and all of these things. And then comes this major disruption. It's this hard turn of deciding, I'm not going to drink anymore. I'm going to change the patterns of how everything happens here. She says she had a lot of shame around her drinking. And I think that that's something a lot of people have, and making it so much a focus of her efforts. And maybe a lot of people out there can kind of relate to what it's like to have shame around your drinking. I think I did. I think that I tried to make light of having a beer at night as just like, oh, it's just like a thing that I do to relax. But when I look at it a little more critically for myself, why is that my reward? Why is drinking something that is technically a poison a reward to me? And so that's kind of how I started thinking about things.
At Overlake Medical Center and Clinics, we offer the full spectrum of care for every stage of life. And with our skilled and compassionate physicians and care teams, it's so much more than a place to get better. It's where you can achieve a lifetime of good health. Welcome to Overlake, where your care is our passion. For more information, visit overlakehospital.org.
I think the shame part of drinking, especially if we're talking about the subset of moms, for example, it comes because it tends to be a solitary activity, right? You're drinking alone. And the whole saying goes, well, you don't have a problem. If you're socially drinking, it's okay. But if you find yourself drinking by yourself, then you may have a problem. Well, a lot of moms do that on purpose. And what I mean by that is the alcohol, that moment with whether it's wine or beer, that's your me time. You don't want anyone else around. That is the point. It's where you buy your silence. You can enjoy the peace, or insert your reason here. But that is what women are seeking, and I think that's where the roads intersect. You're drinking by yourself, which society tells you is a no-no, but that's what you want to be doing, to be by yourself.
And society also tells you you're supposed to be the perfect mom who does
Right.
everything for your kids, and then you're also
Sure.
working. And so there's
Right.
a lot baked in.
But a mom drinking by herself, having a glass of wine, is not the same as the drunk alone at the bar on a Tuesday at 11 a.m., right?
And you're drinking wine. It's classy. You're not ripping shots.
The imagery is interesting.
That's why this mommy wine culture is real. And it's all over the place. So she decides that she wants to address it. So she does this cleanse. She does the first 10 days. She knows she feels really good, but she's running into a couple hurdles, and the hurdles are boredom. She had so much more time on her hands because she would otherwise be relaxing and sitting on the couch having a glass of wine or 2 or 3. And now she's not doing that. So what does she do? And she says she changed her family's schedule. They would go swimming instead at 6 o'clock at night to break up the disruption of the normal time that she would be, sitting down to drink. And that was just an example of something she does, but she noticed that boredom was one of her big triggers. And she says, because you want to change your drinking habits, you don't have to be an alcoholic to want to change your drinking habits. Although you'll notice the first time you walk in a room and you say you are not drinking, then the question is why?
Oh, everyone looks at you like you're weird.
Right. Whereas, like, if you walked into a room and people were doing a bunch of hard drugs and you said, oh, I'm not doing heroin today, would people say, why? Whereas that is the response to alcohol.
Sure, it's a socially accepted drug.
Yes. Anyway, so she's here. She's deciding that there's something to be done with that uncomfortable space, and she wants to help normalize people either choosing not to drink or drink less. And sometimes that's drinking non-alcoholic beverages or just changing things. So she finds herself on the outside. She's looking in at all of these people who are now drinking. She has a little bit better perspective on it, and she sees an opportunity here. So she decides that she's going to start taking to social media.
I made videos about drinking to survive motherhood. I was mommy wine culture. And when you take a step back, you're not part of that tribe anymore. And that can feel really ostracizing, especially as you have young kids, you're going to events, you're meeting new moms, and alcohol can be a way for people to socialize and come together. And so when you don't participate in that, it can feel very hard and ostracizing. And so that will get easier. I always tell people you will get those reps. The first time you have to tell somebody you don't really drink, the first time you hang out with your girlfriends and you don't drink, like after you get through those reps, it gets easier. You will get more confident in those situations, and people will kind of get to know the new you too. Like, oh yeah, okay, Katie might have a glass of wine, but probably not. And that's okay. This is Katie. Now we know. So you have to give people kind of time to catch up.
You do. You have to practice it. I remember going out to dinner with Michael a couple times, and then usually we'd sit down and have like a beer. And I was like, do you have any NA options?
You use that term, NA.
Do you have any NA?
You're light years ahead of me.
I really wanted to sound like I knew what I was talking about. I will say the non-alcoholic beer options have just shot through the roof.
Katie is right. You go through the desert feeling very isolated,
Yes.
lonely, ostracized. But yes, you hit the nail on the head. It has never been easier to be an A person. I mean, just go to any grocery store. It's almost like the non-alcoholic aisles are becoming what the nut milk aisles were when they first exploded. You know what
And
I
now
mean?
nut milk's all over the place.
Yes. And they're not cheap.
No.
But I digress.
Yeah. And you still have to show your ID for non-alcoholic beer. Isn't that
Drives
crazy?
me crazy.
Me too. Pulling out that ID all over the place. Or you have to bring it to the person with DoorDash.
So
Yes, I DoorDash non-alcoholic beer to my house. Yes, I do.
you have to show ID. Good to know.
Or Instacart. Either ones. We're all about options here. Anyway, so she's talking about how she feels really ostracized. And she described one story where she was meeting a bunch of these moms for the first time. And all these moms are all holding their beverages. And they ask her, like, so what do you do? And then here she is. She's not drinking. And now she's like, oh, I teach people how to drink less, And then it's always, it's that soft topic
Sure.
for a lot of people who are like, oh, yeah, I'm just drinking just right now to celebrate moms. There's always a reason that someone has to explain
it makes
why
them
they're doing it.
defensive. It makes people defensive.
Yes, exactly. So she's finding that there's this opportunity She also feels like she wants to go back to work. She tried doing the stay-at-home mom thing for her. She said it was too hard. She needed something else, so she wants to start working. So she found this opportunity, and this is when she started Soberish Mom, which is her title, because she decided she didn't want to abstain completely. She's going to drink every once in a while. She kind of started it as a hobby, and then it kind of took off from there.
I talked to my husband about it. That I felt a lot of shame. I think people feel a lot of shame around their drinking habits, maybe. And if they're starting to become concerned, then you really internalize it. And so it was the first time that I was like, hey, I'm going to try and go a few weekends. Like I started on a Thursday, so it was going to be 2 weekends without drinking. I had a very strong correlation with drinking on the weekends. And I'm like kind of scared, and I need you to help me because I feel like I'm going to be so bored. Boredom was always my trigger to drink. Like I'm so bored. I out in social settings, it got easier for me not to drink really fast, but at home, stuck with your kids, that's when I would reach for wine. That was kind of my time. And so he was like, okay, so we planned different things. We did stuff we would never have done. That's one of my biggest tips when you're starting out is like boredom is the enemy.
It's finding that void and then filling it, seeing there's this opportunity to give information to people and recognizing it and then deciding to just jump on and hold on.
I think it's so great that she's in the gray zone too, right? It's not mostly black and white. Are you sober? Do you drink? Why can't people be in the middle? And I think she is reaching out to a lot more people that way. It's more, I don't know, welcoming. It's more forgiving. It's more.
The problem is it's a dangerous area for exactly what you're saying. She wants to be sober-ish. So she's kind of talking moderation. She also describes sober-ish, if you're wondering what does that mean. It's kind of like sober-curious, which is what a lot of people are saying right now. Mary has put her palm to her forehead. Why is the palm to the forehead?
Sober curious.
Yes.
I had never, no, I know it's a thing. Well, and I know now it's a thing. It just sounds funny, okay? It's the first time I've heard of that phrase. Wow.
Yes.
I learn something new every day with you.
You know, that's what we're here for.
I have
That's
a
what Katie
question.
is here for. Yes.
How much was Katie drinking, though?
About 15 drinks a week on average.
What does that break down to? Like
You're asking me to do fast
I
math?
know, like
Oh my
three glasses of wine, you know.
Yeah. And that's every day. So she says, you know, she wasn't, as you described, like the drunk at the bar who's crashing her car and getting DUIs and doesn't and blacks out every single day. She was not that. She describes it as just being a very consistent, heavy drinker because heavy becomes for women more than one. Whether we like it or not, that's what the docs say.
More than one a day. Okay.
More than one a day makes for heavy drinking. For men, it's more than 2, I think is the latest description of it. It's not easy because some people say, well, if you're going to do moderation, just abstain. If you're saying it's not healthy for you, why are you doing it at all? And I think what she's trying to find is that middle ground where she's not saying, hey, you have to be stone cold sober the rest of your life, which for some people who are sober curious, that's a daunting idea of like, I'm never going to drink alcohol again ever in my life whatsoever. That seems a little too much maybe if people aren't ready to do that. And yet there are programs that are based specifically on never drinking again, which I think is what AA does. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not in AA,
Right.
so I don't know, but I think that that's the general idea. So it's a tricky spot. So she starts putting this all out on social media. And what does that do? It gets her a lot of followers. It gets her some great opportunities, some great partnerships, and she's putting out good content for people. It also brings out the trolls because people's drinking habits, of course, are very personal. So people attack a lot about this moderation. What is this moderation you're talking about? We were talking about the NA biz and how big it is right now, how she was hitting at just the right point. Can I give you some statistics?
Please tell me.
Oh, please, let me.
Because
push up
I
my
am
glasses.
sober curious.
She is sober curious, folks. So as we touched on before, the no or low alcoholic beers, wines, spirits, it has just exploded. The global market is now valued above $13 billion. Global sale volumes of non-alcoholic drinks are expected to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 7% between 2023 and 2027. They make up nearly 4% of overall alcohol market. 4% might not sound like a lot, but when you picture those grocery store shelves that you were talking about earlier.
I'm telling you, it's the next aisle invasion. It's going to creep into the wine section and the spirit section.
That's right. So I wanted to talk to her a little bit more about the experience of deciding to put something that's so vulnerable on social media and just kind of airing it out for everyone as an influencer.
So I had a ton of free time and I wanted to help other women who I thought could benefit from just hearing a little bit more about my journey. And something that I felt really strongly was like, I couldn't find myself represented in content online. Like I wasn't in the drinking mommy wine culture anymore. I also wasn't sober. And so I couldn't find the information I was looking for. How do you cut back drinking? What non-alcoholic wines are good? I couldn't find product reviews. Like I was wasting a ton of my money. And I thought this is like information people would maybe find really helpful. And so it was a creative outlet for me. And then it just took off. I never expected it to turn into my full-time career.
So she has a ton of great information. If anyone out there is interested, I don't mean to be all preachy. I don't mean to be preachy about cutting back alcohol. I think any doctor would tell you that if you are drinking heavily just as a fact, it is probably more healthy to cut back. I also recognize it's everyone's own decision for what works well in their life. If you feel like you're drinking at a rate that you feel like works for you, then okay. But from my own experience, I had this thirst. I don't know how else to describe it. Thirst is the word for more information. And it turns out that is a thing too. When you decide you want to cut back, people dive headfirst into Quit Lit.
Oh my gosh, two for one today for Mary.
That's right.
Sober Curious and Quit Lit.
Sober Curious and Quit Lit. And there are a bunch of different books out there that I listened to on audiobook, which kind of took over my Spotify for a while there. And then there are a bunch of other like podcasts you can listen to. There's Andrew Huberman. There's all these different folks. But moral of the story is there's a lot of information out there, and Katie wanted to try and connect people to it. And she says that it has been such a great decision for her, not just cutting back alcohol and that, but being a source for people out there and bringing them information. I don't know. Have you ever had an experience where you've gone through something and you're like, oh, I think people can learn from this experience?
One of the biggest ones, probably the most personal one, Kelly, and that totally echoes what Katie went through. For me, it was my own breast cancer diagnosis, how I found my cancer, what the treatment was like, and right away, you want to share what you went through.
And that's exactly kind of what she touches on. She was looking out there for other people just like her and kind of saw a void of a place that she could lend a voice to and have it resonate with people. And she's heard from people all over the world. And of course, there are lots of pitfalls because trying to stop drinking sounds like a great idea until you start doing it. For some people, that difficult moment comes the same day they decide they're going to quit, when it comes to that 5, 6 o'clock thing that they have the routine.
The ritual.
For other people, other than that day, maybe it's a weekend thing, and that always brings a pitfall. So there are a lot of triggers out there. And so she touched on a couple triggers that she ran into in her own journey and how she copes.
It's demanded so much of my time, and it's my passion. I love doing it. And it's been a wild ride. Becoming like a quote unquote influencer or content creator, however you want to call it, putting your life on social media every day is one of the most mentally tolling things I've done. It's really taught me how to take criticism with a grain of salt, let things go, not try and find my worth and value in other people's opinions, because you get so much feedback from everyone on no matter what you share, and good and bad. And so it's really taught me a lot about becoming a more mentally strong person, a more confident person. And what really keeps me going is just, every morning my DMs are just filled with messages from women all across the world. It's just, oh my gosh, this has helped me. If you can do it, look at this chick. She was drinking 15 drinks a week. Now she barely does. Like, if she can do it, maybe I can do it.
The fear of the unknown. I have to ask you, along with her, going on vacation, all these things that you associate drinking and fun with, was her husband on board?
Yes. Now,
okay.
I don't think her husband went the same route necessarily of, completely cutting back either, but he supported her in this, and it was something that she had support with him going through it.
Got it.
Yeah. So in terms of structurally making changes with their family, going to swim at 6 p.m., for example, rather than sitting on the couch watching a movie and having a beer while the kids play or go to bed or whatever. So he was on board, and I think that that's a very important thing, is having a support structure in place and having people that you live with, if it's a partner, husband, wife, friend, whatever, also on board with you to support you and back you up. But one of the things that she touched on there, and you mentioned this earlier, was doing things the first time. the first time you go into that party and you're not going to drink. Well, guess what? You make it through that first one, and then you've already done that first one. So maybe the second one is a little less daunting. Or if you want to just cut back and have one, something like that. But once you do things the first time, I think it helps. One thing for me, also, I was choosing to drink less because there was more negativity in life, and I thought any more negativity just wouldn't be helpful. What I also found is that sometimes there's a correlation with drinking, like when you're sad or like you need an escape or just like, oh God, I just need a glass of wine or something. And for me, I found that was one place I didn't want to touch that. It seemed too dangerous, having this big existential life crisis. And then also choosing to drink just seemed like it would be too heavy. I don't know that I would be strong enough to also be drinking in life and also going through a very difficult period of life.
But also seeing that connection is dangerous to make in the first place. That's big, Kelly.
Well,
extremely self-aware.
I don't know.
Some bonds are hard to break, and that would
Yes.
definitely be one.
Yeah. So I don't know. She has some different advice for people on what she thinks they can do. For any time that you've decided to make a change that's been hard for you to do, have you found anything that's been particularly helpful? We talked about support systems.
I just know that anytime you make a change, period, everyone notices. It could be something like, oh, I'm going to go for a run every morning. Your kids look at you like, where are you going? What? Your husband, what's going on here?
What are those leggings, Mommy?
Yeah. So I think to answer your question, I don't even think it has to be anything alcohol related. Anything you do that is not what you normally do gets noticed. It could be a haircut. It could be cutting back on eating sweets, cutting back on how much meat you eat. It's just the minute someone notices, it's like, oh, what's going on? Why are you doing that?
I think it's also really helpful to have a clear goal in your own mind of what you want to do. And I will correct myself because I heard something not too long ago that really helped me. And it talked about not necessarily setting a goal for yourself, but setting a standard. What is the standard I am going to set for myself? A goal feels more aspirational. If you don't make it, if you fail, then so what? It was a lofty goal. But if you set a standard for yourself, and this could be any area of life, do you want to watch less TV or work out more or eat out at a restaurant less or something? Set a standard for yourself as opposed to a goal. And that really resonated with me. And I think for anyone who's out there listening thinking, I want to change a drinking habit, that maybe that's a frame of mind that works for me. And I don't know, maybe it can help someone else.
I also feel like there's a very simple response that I think works for a lot of people. And the response is, because it makes me feel like crap. And I don't want to feel, I got to do something about that. Whether you cut back on snacks or sweets or meat or alcohol or, you go to the gym once again, people start looking at you like, oh, why are you doing that for? What's going on? Did something happen? Like, no, I just feel like crap. I got to do something about it. And I find that usually shuts people up because no one can argue with that.
And when you're at a party, think about the end of the night. No one is looking at Mary over there in the corner after they've been drinking themselves, looking over at Mary and be like, gosh, has she had 2 or 20 drinks tonight? At that point, no one cares how much anyone else is drinking.
Yeah.
So let's focus on ourselves, I guess. One of the last things I asked Katie was, is there anything that she would have done differently in her hard turn of getting sober and then turning it into an influencer platform? Here's what she said.
I wish I had started sooner. I think that's how everyone feels when they start this journey, is like, man, I wish I had started sooner. And anyone listening to this who's feeling shame or feeling like they want to make a change but doesn't know if they can, don't beat yourself up. You are going to make mistakes. I've made so many mistakes. You're going to have slip ups. But as long as you stay curious, you have not failed. As long as you are willing to continue working on your relationship with whatever it is. It could be alcohol, it could be cannabis, it could be processed foods, it could be whatever you are feeling like, I have something in my life that's like holding me back from the best version of myself. You owe it to yourself to try, and you're gonna mess up, but you just, as long as you stay curious, you keep trying, then you're on the path to success. You just never, ever give up.
It's encouraging. I like what she said.
Yeah.
As long as you stay curious, you're not failing.
And that it's never too late too. When's the best time to start something? It's now. If you're doing something that you feel like is harming your health, the best time to address it is now, not kicking the can down the road to later. But I think that That's great. And I love how she's not forcing people saying abstain or die. Because, if people do go also cold turkey after drinking heavily, they can also have some serious health effects from that too. So it's knowing your body, knowing what you want, and just if there's a little voice in you that gets uncomfortable when someone else maybe says they're not drinking, maybe ask yourself why. Why does that make me feel uncomfortable? And just look at yourself. I know I've had long, hard conversations with myself.
I like how she's gentle about it, approachable. Because these are hard things to talk about. It's so loaded. It's so loaded with like self-evaluation, labels, self-judgment, societal judgment, fears. It's not just about the wine. And it makes you look in the mirror,
I think there's even a movement. I was listening to something recently that talks about they're trying to move away from the label alcoholic. They're changing that just to be like someone who has a problem with alcohol. Far more wordy.
Are you going to teach me a third?
No, I don't have the answer on this
moniker,
one.
label.
No. I figure 2 is enough for today. But, this is something that is evolving right now, whether it's non-alcoholic versions of spirits and wine and beer. And she does a whole lot of reviews on her social media. So if you're looking for some NA options.
That right after this.
Yeah. I think you were asking about an NA Chardonnay or something.
No.
An NA wine.
No.
Were you never asking about NA wine?
No,
Did I
do
make
want
that
to
up?
talk. No, I do want to talk to her. NA red wine, Kelly.
Oh, okay.
Red wine.
Okay. Well, she's your girl then. So I want to thank Katie for talking to us about something that's really vulnerable for a lot of people and giving people options and finding whatever works for each of us individually.
What a timely conversation. Loved it.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Kelly.
Hard Turn is a Sinclair podcast produced out of KOMO TV in Seattle, Washington. We're your hosts, Kelly Koopmans
and Mary Nom. Our show is produced and edited by Jordan Rizzieri and Brian Petrus, with engineering support from Adam Bronstein, Bill Thesh, and John Reynolds. Production support from Eric Newell.
For more information on the topics discussed in this episode and to stay up to date on future episodes, follow us on Instagram at Hard Turn Podcast and on X at Hard Turn Pod.
You can follow Hard Turn on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Do you know someone making a big change in their life? Share this week's episode. Your recommendation helps our show grow. So spread the word. Don't touch my Cheetos.
Hard Turn was presented by Overlake Medical Center and Clinics.